Hi, everybody. Brendan Davis here. I have a note before we go any further. We recorded this interview on a three-way Skype call that was mercifully high quality, but we did have a big interruption in the middle. It's kind of a surprise. I'll tell you more about that in just a moment. But because I ended up doing most of the talking with our guest, Ying suggested that I tackle this intro all by myself. So I'm happy to do it. Now, here's our music. Welcome to How China Works, where we talk with doers and thinkers and makers and shakers around the world who have practical insights into China. This week, we were honored to speak with Cordell Carter. Ying met Kordell on the panel that she also spoke on at the Harassus China meeting a couple of months ago. Now, I was busy. I was chairing another panel at the exact same time, so I only saw him very briefly running around, and this was my first time actually talking with him, but I hope it won't be the last. I think you'll see why as we get into this. We really had what I think as a great vibe. Excuse my California, but that's how I feel about it. Cordell has an extensive bio, but let me just give you the relevant highlights to this conversation. Cordell Carter is a lawyer, a former Eisenhower Fellow, a tech founder, and a graduate of the Socrates Program who now works at the Aspen Institute himself in D.C., helping to train emerging leaders. In his own words, he is entirely, quote, self-contrived, end quote. He has harnessed an innate desire to maximize his impact to build an impressive life and career for himself, if I do say so. He is particularly passionate about helping young African-American men to also see their futures as being global in scope, which is what led him to creating the Sophomore Project to bring these young men to China at a very impressionable, important time in their development and their young academic life to help show them a bigger, broader world. I think it's pretty cool what he's doing. We connected via Skype, like I mentioned. I was in Palo Alto. Ying was in San Francisco proper, about half an hour away, and Kordell was in Washington, D.C., and there was a fire alarm in her building. That fire alarm went off in the middle of the talk on her side, so she had to drop off a bit while Kordell and I soldiered on. And luckily, she was able to rejoin us later. And after the edit, I don't think you would even know that. You certainly don't hear that. I cut that out for everybody's sake. But on a personal note, I did want to explain why I'm doing kind of so much more of the talking on this one than normal. Kordell shares many insights that we think are crucially important to take to heart, and I know that I did, so we hope that you enjoy listening to this talk. If you did, please visit HowChinaWorksPodcast.com to leave us a comment, check out our other episodes, or something new in the spirit of the holiday season, you can now support the show with a donation, which we would greatly appreciate. We have both a PayPal button and also a WeChat QR code, so depending on your preference, you can find these on the home page as soon as you enter the site, past this photo page that you see when you first go to that URL. One note is that the PayPal goes to my company and the WeChat routes directly to Ying, but donations from both sides will be pooled to help offset the costs of the show. We've been bearing it ourselves for a long time, and it would be really great to have some donations. I'm not going to beg too hard, but if you appreciate what we're doing, we would appreciate seeing that, whether it's in the form of a comment or a like or a share, or if you like and can afford it, a donation in whatever amount you want. Enough of that. Please stay tuned for some closing thoughts after the interview, but for now, please enjoy our talk with Cordell Carter. Well, we're very happy to be here with our guest, Mr. Cordell Carter. How are you, Cordell?
I am well, and you all?
Very good. I like that you said you all. Are you a Southern man as well?
I am indeed. I'm originally from Virginia, Southern Virginia.
Nice. Hi, Ying.
Hi. So glad to have our guest here today.
You said hi, but I sort of drowned you out by accident. That's what happens when we're all on Skype, dear listener. We're all on Skype. Well, Cordell, please do us a favor. We always like to start by asking a guest to give us the short version of who they are, sort of your bio and specific as it leads to your China engagement. Then we'll get into all the details.
Sure. So I will give you the super short version. I currently lead a global education forum for the Aspen Institute based in Washington, D.C. I'm all over the world on behalf of the Institute and these emerging leaders all over just doing amazing things. I'm also part of several international fellowships my many universities, and I love scaling things. I love impact and education. I think it's the game-changing equation for ambitious people to get the right education and be prepared for when opportunity knocks. And that's what I seek to do in everything that I do.
Awesome. So, Cordell, we spoke at Harris China meeting in Vegas on the cultural panel.
Yes.
So you were really passionate about when it comes to the programs, the leadership concept, and something you're really passionate about ensuring, not just for American, right? You're also curious to share about China, right? So there's something that we're really curious to know about your past experience or engagement with China, and we go from there.
Well, I've been long fascinated by China. In America, we are 242 years old, and in terms of nation statehood, that is essentially a giant toddler. When you start comparing, let's just say a middling example like the UK, you're looking at 1,200 years. France, you're looking at 1,400 years. And then you start going to Asia, Japan, 10,000 years, China, 8,000 years. And so we trace our intellectual beginnings, our notion of what democracy is and how to order society and our notions of freedom to the classic period. And so when I was in China, and I'm sitting at Renmin University as an Eisenhower Fellow, and I'm getting the history of China, it dawned on me like the most obvious thing that if the current civilization that we know as China, the current makeup, if you will, is 5,600 to 6,000 years old, that means that our beginnings, the classic period, which was 2,500 years old, China was already in the middle of their statehood. And our beginning was 2,500 years into their beginning. And so it's just the oddest thing ever that you realize in terms of just our space and time, we're really, really starting out. And it has really colored a lot of my work over the last 3 years. I've learned to forgive our mistakes because you make mistakes as you grow. Everybody does. And so, there's some things that aren't working well. The only reason we hold our own country, the U.S., to a high standard is because of the words we use to create this democratic republic, guaranteeing freedoms and believing that it comes from God and all that good stuff. But experiencing 6 weeks in China as an Eisenhower Fellow, I was looking at the innovation ecosystem, meeting 4 or 5 leaders a day for 6 weeks. It was a tremendous experience. I visited probably 7 different cities. So my favorite being Chengdu for obvious reasons, and not the pandas either. It was just,
you like spicy food?
Well, I love hot pot. That's fantastic. I'm not a big fan of stinky tofu, but I tried it.
Me either. Yeah. We can give ours to somebody.
I love the People's Park. I don't know if you've ever been to the People's Park in Chengdu, but the Saturday that I visited, I saw some of the most amazing performance art that I've seen ever. I mean, you would think you're on Broadway. Huh. And these are senior citizens as hobbyists. They're doing ballet on one side. They're doing operatic productions another. They're juggling. It was incredible. And like, how great would we be as a nation if our senior citizens were as active as they are in China?
I say this all the time when I see the dancing grannies doing the square dancing all the time. Right. All the time.
The town square every night, no matter where you are in China, you will see 50 women dancing in a town square. And if you walk by, they will invite you to dance with them.
Absolutely.
It's incredible. It's incredible. But like, what community is built when you do that? And I don't believe you have to be a homogenous society to do that. I think you have to be really clear on what your values are and the type of experience we're all going to have, regardless of income level, regardless of our cultural background. We're going to do certain things together. So there's a lot to learn from China. I also think there's a lot to learn from the U.S. vis-a-vis other countries. And so some of the continuing work I'm doing in China, specifically in Henan, is a summer camp for high school students, engaging them on 21st century communication skills. So it's all in English, and they go for a week or two, and they're building teams, they're doing pitch competitions, and they're just really just cutting their teeth with the way that we pitch businesses and build teams in the Western world. I think it's a great marriage of two cultures, and these young people are so smart. They're operating in their second language, and they're doing it at a very, very high level. And unfortunately, since 2016, I haven't been able to actually witness this. I've only been able to plan it and dispatch other people to go. Just was so busy here in the U.S., but I'm very pleased that 3 years after my first visit, the work continues. The connection continues.
Well, the hit list of things we want to talk about with you is extensive, and so I don't want to bog down too much in past, but I've got to know how you came to be you. I'm always interested in this show. We like to dig a little deeper and see, what other people can learn, because obviously learning by example of people with an interesting biography is something. Would you mind, how did you come to be an Eisenhower Fellow in China? Was this already vis-a-vis the Aspen Institute, or how did that sort of come together? Just kind of the short version of that.
Brendan, I am completely contrived. I'm first in my family to go to college. I think about this often, mostly on my way to work, because I'm walking by and I see the Washington Monument, and I see founding fathers daily. And I think about the experience that I'm having in my 40 years of life vis-a-vis my grandfather, even my father. And they cannot imagine, if they were still alive, that one of their relatives would get to do what I do, to literally travel the world for half the year. I lectured in Ukraine a couple weeks ago, and I'm sitting there and you have these really surreal out-of-body moments, and I'm like, why are they even listening to me?
I totally had that.
Do they know that I'm from a very humble beginning, but I had desire. I wanted to get out. My great uncle gave me a globe when I was 5 years old, and I would spin that globe, and I would stop it, and I would go to my Encyclopedia Britannica and find out what Ukraine was and what China was, and everything that was in the Encyclopedia Britannica, I would write it on index cards, and I would just keep it like little treasures. And I said, one day I'm going to go to those places. And here I am 35 years later, going to those places with regularity. And so I'm incredibly blessed. But I want it, and I've worked really, really hard.
Sure.
And I'm like, I'm not arrogant. I'm being matter of fact. Like, if you work hard, great things will happen for you. So this idea that preparation and opportunity, when those things collide, I am living proof that great things happen. But you got to do your part.
Totally.
You got to do your part. You can't expect it to come to you. And so my only critique to my younger colleagues is that they want everything right now. And I'm saying the journey is a beautiful thing. You will appreciate it more if you actually sweat for it. If you sweat for it, you're going to love it. You're going to enjoy it. You can go deep. If you don't, it'll just be something you think comes to you. And that's just not how it works.
Exactly.
It doesn't just come to you.
Oh, yeah.
You got to work for it.
Totally.
And I don't mind working. I don't mind.
Nice. Well, how did you come to your current engagement? I mean, what was sort of your academic / professional path?
Sure.
And then let's get into your present day as much as we can.
Yeah. So I studied international political economy as an undergraduate at the Jackson School at University of Washington. I was just very fascinated in other societies around the world. And then I went to work I went to graduate school at Carnegie Mellon. I studied public policy and management, focused on IT, specifically in tax. So these are just things that are very interesting to me. And I was strongly considering a doctoral degree. I wanted to do a JD PhD, and I thought I would lead universities, international institutions. And then I went to work for IBM. And it was an amazing 4 years with IBM. And I got to really do interesting work and lead projects. And it was the first time, I'm in my early 20s, and I'm leading people on projects that have been working longer than I've been alive, and experiencing and learning from their wisdom and the ups and downs of leadership. Heavy is the crown, the head that wears the crown. Yes. Oh, I had some days where I really didn't want to lead anymore. I just wanted to be a person. And I said, that's not my path. Okay. That's not my calling. My calling is to lead. So you just got to soldier on and get better at it. And so then I went off to law school. I went to Notre Dame Law School in Indiana. And I absolutely hated the practice of law at law firms. I just couldn't do it. I think the IBM experience, where I was touching customers every day, completely ruined me from this idea that you go back into a room and do research on briefs for 5 years. I was like, no, I can't do that. And so I had an opportunity to be a Bosch Fellow, a Robert Bosch Fellow for Young American Leaders. This is about 13 years ago. I spent a year in Germany. I had taken the bar while I was in law school, and I passed. So I was able to practice at a international bank in China. I was selling, in Frankfurt, the climate protection fund, and we were selling carbon emission credits. So I'm writing contracts with a lot of Chinese companies that were buying carbon emission credits from the former Eastern Bloc. So where these economies were sinking and manufacturing was going away. As China was rising, this is 2007, 2008, so really cooking before the mortgage crisis wiped out a lot of they needed these emission credits for the European trading system. And so we're writing contracts, and that was really interesting how you just can create a market for something. And then I came back to the U.S. to work for the Eli and Edith Broad Foundation, and they did a lot of work on education reform. And I did labor relations and system reform, and it was a fascinating experience for 3 years in Seattle, and then moved on to D.C. to be a lobbyist on education and workforce. And that is when I had my first interaction with the Aspen Institute. I was recruited to go to Aspen winter of 2012 with the same program that I lead now. The Socrates Program. My topic was social media and society. At that point in time, I wasn't tweeting. I didn't know what it was. I certainly wasn't blogging. I wasn't doing any writing in a public place. I had a Facebook account, but I hardly looked. It just wasn't my thing. When you lobby for a business association, you'd be very careful what you publish because you're representing 200 companies. And so no 200 people think the same way.
Exactly.
And so you just really, really careful. And I was really, really careful. And so as such, you're just not very public. But after that seminar, I was like, you know what? I do have a voice, and I should do something different with that voice. And so I think within 2 years, I was recruited to the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. And I was chief of staff for one of their divisions. Did not enjoy the experience. It was just way too ministerial for me. And then I went to a startup. I led a startup out of Chattanooga and launched it. It's called Tech Town. It's still going. We were building or just training young people. So imagine a 25,000 square foot facility with hundreds of computers and film room and 3D printing and the circuitry course. And it was just a really, really great experience for us. And we were honored in 2016 by the Obama administration as a champion of change in computer science education. And then started to branch off to training adults, underemployed adults, with the exact same training we were doing for the young people. And it was just amazing experience. And at that point, literally while I was in the White House, the Eisenhower Fellowship Program called and said, hey, we would like you to be one of our Zhijing Fellows. And Zhijing is to learn by travel.
Right.
I said, love it. I said, I would love to do that. When is it? And they said, later in the year. And I said, perfect. And so, I was 2+ years in at the startup, 80-hour weeks, commuting back and forth from Chattanooga to Seattle. It was a very challenging time for myself
That's
and
a big
my family. Oh, yeah, that's a big trip. And it was a weekly trip. It was I've been Delta Diamond for a long time, just put it that way.
Got it.
The trip, I took everyone to China. So my spouse and my child, who was 9 at the time, we all go to China together, and we meet up in Shanghai and go to Xi'an to see the terracotta soldiers and a wild goose pagoda. We go to Beijing, and we have this wonderful time with all the sights and sounds. And then the fellowship started, and then my wife and daughter continued on with their tour guide, and they had a great time. They still haven't told me everything that they've seen. I've just seen the pictures. But
you got to work, basically.
Exactly. But just the reception that we had for those 2 weeks, my daughter still talks about it and how she wants to go back. And,
nice.
I said, well, you should look at universities there. And she was studying Mandarin for a little bit and just really enjoying the experience. And I was like, I don't think you get it. We are in the midst of an 8,000-year-old culture. There's nothing like it on Earth.
Yeah.
And yes, most people are Chinese, but there's tremendous diversity here. But for a 9-year-old, it blew her mind.
Sure.
It blew her mind. And I'm watching how she has become a very global person. And we go back and forth to France because that's where her mom is from.
Okay.
But France and the U.S., the only difference is the language. I mean, culturally, we're pretty close.
Very close,
right?
Very close.
The French think they're much better at it. But we're both pretty egotistical about our cultures. But you go to China, you have to use.
Well, we all have that in common with respect to my Chinese friends. Everybody's very, very, very proud of their culture, understandably. But.
Everyone's very proud of it. Very, very proud of it. Just we hope that proud doesn't become tribal.
Exactly. Exactly.
That's the hope. And so I had this epiphanal moment one night as I was walking in Beijing. I was lost in a hutong looking for this restaurant, and my fellow colleagues, they were at the restaurant waiting for me. Like, dude, we're waiting for you to order. Where are you?
I know this. I know this experience so well.
Right.
In other words, you're in the hutongs. Yeah. It's like, okay, where are we?
Exactly right. And it's not like I can read Mandarin, so I have no idea. I'm using WeChat navigational tool to try to find the restaurant.
Right.
And I was fairly close. I was confident, and I did find it. But as I'm walking, every 50 steps, you run to someone, and they say, I'm saying ni hao or ni hao ma, depending on their age,
right.
and they said, oh, NBA photo. And it's humorous to me because I'm not a tall fellow, not horribly athletic.
Okay.
And I was like, oh, obviously I've never seen.
Because you're African American, they think you somehow connected to the NBA. Okay, well.
Yeah, but it was all.
Well, back when they loved it, it was probably not coming from a bad place. It was just not knowing.
Exactly. But the epiphanal moment came probably around the fifth photo request, and you realize. I'm an African-American male walking at night that's not well lit. In the United States, I would be very aware of my surroundings because I know that my presence is a dangerous situation for me and the people around me just because of how things are in the U.S. But here we are in a quote-unquote foreign culture, completely different framework, Confucius framework.
Yeah.
And I am greeted with wonder and excitement.
They want selfies. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And so it begs the question, a Judeo-Christian culture created a situation where I could be shot in the face just for walking around. Whereas this other culture that we say is foreign and borderline inferior to ours, not the best way to be, you're greeted with wonder and excitement like you would want to be greeted anywhere in the world. And so it just like, I'm 40 and I'm experiencing this. What about the 14-year-olds in America who the value of their very lives are being questioned on television by national politicians? I want them desperately to understand that the world doesn't see them the way America does.
Exactly.
The world is much bigger. And I was like, how would that change their lives if they were having an experience I was having as a much younger person?
Yeah.
And so it really created a spark in me. And it was weird because I'm sitting there and I started to cry because I was angry. I was excited. And then it's weird. Now I'm a big dude crying. And I couldn't explain why I'm crying.
Right.
It's way too complex, right?
Sure. Yeah.
But it's a pivotal moment for me. And I said, I have to get young black men here.
Yeah.
I want them here early. I want them here as 12, 13, 14-year-olds.
Absolutely.
And I'm like, and I'm not going to a foundation and say fund it. I'm like, no, I'm going to your parent and to say, listen, if they were really gifted in a sport, you would invest hell and high water to make sure they were the best in that sport. I'm telling you, it's a greater likelihood that they'll be a professional in something that's not athletic. I would say it's 99% certain that they will.
Right.
Okay. And so if you're serious about raising a child that can lead in the 21st century, you better get their little ass to China straight up.
Well, so this has really become a big part of your mission. How is that? Yeah. How is that playing out in real time? How is that?
I call it the Sophomore Project. The Sophomore Project because I would like them to go sophomore year of high school. The timing of the academic calendars in China actually works to our advantage here.
Okay.
Number one, we end classes in the U.S. right at December before the Christmas holidays, and I'm saying after Christmas holidays and New Year's, you take a cohort to China.
Yeah.
And they get to see China when there's not tourist season. It's going to be cold, but it's all good. At least they'll get to see all the sights and sounds with no lines, which is great.
This is true.
And then they would get an acculturation course, some basic Mandarin, some grounding in the history of where they are. And then smaller groups, 3 to 5, you send them to international high schools where English is their primary language.
Yeah, and those kids are in school until the Chinese New Year. So that's a good, I get the math of this. Yeah.
Yes. And so they would get to see it, right? And I'm saying this is, an experience that will change their lives to spend a full semester. They come back to the U.S. very different 15-year-olds. They come back with a world of knowledge, an adjusted worldview. They can start to really compare and contrast what's going on here versus what's going on there. And I know that whatever nonsense I have here is temporary, that I have another place I can go, that the world is much bigger than my block, much bigger than my city, And there are other leaders besides the people that are talking on TV right now. And so I know this is a game changer for the African American community in the United States. And I was really hoping, I had set my horses, if you will, with a nascent charter school here in DC called Bolt Academy. And we were going to make a year in China compulsory for all the students.
Wow.
And yeah. And it was, we tried and failed twice to get the charter approved by the charter board here in DC.
Doesn't sound super easy. Sounds awesome and ambitious, but pretty difficult task.
It's pretty difficult. It really is. And my original thought is that I wanted this to be an independent enterprise where you literally like a study abroad program right in the middle of the year. And then I was convinced that it'd be more efficient to do it through this school because I'm very serious and I don't want this to be a philanthropic effort. I'm not here trying to help poor kids. I'm here working with families that say, we want to build a leader.
Yeah.
That's what I want.
Right.
So those are the families highly motivated to make this a great experience for their kids and for themselves. And so we're back to the drawing board in a sense, because the original plan was to make it independent and recruit families. And we're right back there because we couldn't do it through the charter school route.
So you're pursuing it again through the more direct channel in a way.
Exactly. And it is. I mean, contrary to what people believe, there's tremendous wealth in this country. And there's a lot of desire to create amazing experiences for young people. And I mean, our education systems have I'd say we're still in our Gregorian calendar. Even our best private schools are still using an old calendar. Right. And not creating this holistic experience that I think is necessary to build a globalist, a global mindset. Right. And for young people to grow up and not be exposed to China early, I think it puts them at a strategic disadvantage. It's not something you want to experience the first time you're in college. You should experience it earlier than that. You start building relationships much earlier. Start, being WeChat with your friends when you're 15, 16, 17, 18, and then connecting in the summers for holiday plans. Because that's where the world is going. And regardless of what happens at our highest levels, playing games with domestic politics, trying to score points here and there that don't make a lot of sense. We, the people, can do something different, and that's what we're striving to do.
Well, I'm a huge fan of what you're doing. I've done a little bit of research, but also, of course, mostly from you telling me, and also the people listening to the show don't have the advantage of we're on Skype, we're able to see each other, so that the fire, the passion you have for this is really palpable. And really, honestly, I'm on my own mission, but it's humbling and affirming that you have such a mission for this. What are some of the things that you take in terms of innovation, with China and how China is working as you're working to help expand the concept of what's possible with the people, the youth you want to work with and are working with. And you look at China and you see how they're innovating in different ways, and you see their emphasis on education. And of course, we wouldn't do everything the same way they do it, and vice versa. But they are nonetheless having positive results in the way that they're operating for their world. What are some of the lessons you're taking from how China's doing things, and what are some of the ways that you think you can best integrate with that?
Yeah, one of the things I really enjoyed watching were the grandparents. Sitting in these squares, watching the grandparents literally give up the latter half or the latter thirds of their existence in support of these little toddlers running around. They're holding them so like precious metal. They're holding these babies, taking care of. So think about a child who may not see mom and dad every day or as much as they would like because they're working. They're trying to make something happen for them. They're building, they're growing. Having that supportive structure in place that is familiar, I think is important. So the most innovative I saw was the most basic, and that just social cohesion, right? This idea that we're not just individuals, that we are a unit and that we're going to support each other. And I'm going to make personal sacrifices to ensure that is the case. We have a lot to learn with respect to that. There are limits to individualism. And it really shows the externalities of being so focused on yourself is that at the end of the day, you just have yourself.
Right.
And you can go further with us than you can by yourself. I'm just convinced of it. And so we have this cultural ethos of Horatio Alger, the rugged individualist. And I'm saying that is a faulty notion. And it's showing up. It shows up in a variety of ways. But the societal externalities of individualism at the scale at which we are in the U.S., I think, is creating some of these achievement gaps that we have, that we test for, that we see all the time. Number two, what I saw is just that heavy emphasis on education as a gateway. As a child, you know what your job is, right? Yeah. Your job is to score as well as you can that Gal-Cal, high stakes. Now, I don't know if the American psyche can take one test determining your first job or your university going. That'd be too much for us.
I don't think the Chinese psyche can take it from all my Chinese friends.
Exactly,
so right. the psychic damage from that process, but nonetheless, please continue.
But the ones that had done really well, these are the ones I was interacting with. These are the Chinese students that we've gone to school with here in the U.S. at our elite universities. These are the ones that we work with at our brand name organizations. Right. They're also the ones that are being recruited back to China. And they're leading companies. I walked into so many amazing incubators, and you can see the level of investment. I mean, take your best WeWork, it would put it to shame. Tremendous facility. Access to everything needed, all in one-stop shopping. So your bank is there, the government office that you need for licenses is there, all on the first floor. All you have to do is innovate.
Absolutely, yeah.
And so, We have COOs being hired at startups just to do all the administrivia. So what if you can cut down that by 50%, and that person is just doing the different lines on site? You have that much more capacity to do the work. Fourthly, I should say, there's a renewed sense of possibility there. It's palpable. You can feel it. You walk the streets of Shenzhen, you running around Shanghai, and people are believing. They're believing that there is greater to be achieved, and that I don't know how it is being spread, but that optimism I think is so important for innovation. You got to believe that something new can be done, otherwise there's no need to innovate. And so I thought that for a variety of reasons, to the degree that there is a race. It's a foregone conclusion who's going to win, and it's not just a numbers game. It's a total investment game. Jack Ma said something very, very interesting. I want to say maybe a couple years ago that keeps getting repeated, and I will mention it here. You look at industrial policy over the last 50 years. In the U.S., we've invested $17 trillion in munitions, in the military industrial complex. We essentially organize our economy outside of our Department of Defense. That's we use it as a primary distribution mechanism. We keep bases in all 50 states to ensure their job creation. And it is a strategy that obviously works. But the question is, does it work well for most people? Well, that same $17 trillion has been invested in people, in education systems, and workforce development systems in China. We're seeing the result. The largest middle class, meaning people make over $70,000 by household, by far. But it's 570 million people when I was there in 2016. I suspect there's probably another 100 million now, which means almost 700 million people are middle class. So that domestic economy, a domestic demand, is bigger than the demand of the U.S. and the EU combined. Mm-hmm. So think about that for a second. Like, who's really being harmed in a trade war when you have a domestic demand that outstrips the foreign demand? I mean, these are not questions that we're asking at the right levels in the U.S. So there is no competition. The competition is a rhetorical one. What's happening is a fundamental shift of economic power, of international influence. It's moving eastward, and we have to figure out how we can be better partners and better global citizens, and frankly, more integrated with China than we have been before.
So, Kordell, let me ask you this. We met at Horizon China meeting where we got a little bit about your idea on this global diplomacy. And this year is 2019. Looking into the future, what kind of initiative and leadership citizens could take from now on, so that we truly look into a win-win future? Because you know that different level of stakeholders have the different agenda or demands, but fundamentally people around the world need a future that could be really cover most of these issues, and we're dealing with conflicts, but mostly we're trying to build a common humanity together. Yeah. So let me ask you, what are your thoughts on this?
Well, first, I'll take it two ways. I'll give you a bifurcated response. One is on leaders and the positive obligation that we have as people leaders to ensure two things are happening. One, it's not just about command control. We don't want robots. We want innovative people that feel that they're adding value. They understand the mission, and they see their part in it. We are aligned on values of the organization. We'll never achieve our greatest possibility unless we figure that out. And so I call this the leader curator, this idea that he or she can't accomplish it on their own, but they fully understand the value their business unit adds to the overall picture, not just to their company, but to the world. And they are helping the people that they lead understand what it means to be successful in that role, right? Number one, this is what it means to be successful. Let me make sure that you can be successful over and over and over again. And once they figure out how they can be successful on a consistent basis, then it is my responsibility and our responsibility as leaders to curate an upwardly mobile path for them. So you are actively seeking out professional development for them. Okay, you want them to be ready for the next role. They know what that next role is. They want it as much as you want it for them. They still need to be successful, no doubt, in their role. But you are also allotting in 5 hours a month to make sure that they are getting exposed to something that's going to help them with the next role. I'll give you a great example. Yesterday, we've had a very trying year, just very busy, very successful. But we took the entire day and went to the Hirshhorn sculpture garden. And we sat there and was like, well, how does this piece move you? And we spent 5 hours talking about modern art and the avant-garde movement and the Bauhaus movement. And then we went to lunch. And
I want to work for you guys. I'm not smart enough, but I want to work for you guys.
Right. But this is how we keep each other motivated and that we recognize each other. But also, I'm like, okay, when you're leading this seminar for someone else, basically when you are in my seat, this is how I suggest you go about it, right? So leader curator, that's the idea. And then so the obligation of those that are being led, the normal everyday people, learn. You cannot accept as a given what anyone else tells you. I think you have to strive for self-improvement every single day. I mentioned earlier that I'm completely contrived. I'm completely contrived because I wanted something bigger for myself, something that was unimaginable. So what did I do? I started looking at people that were already doing it. Before the internet was around, you had something called a who's who's guide. And I literally would go to the public library and pull out a who's who's guide every year. Yeah. And I would find people that were lawyers, that were CEOs. And I would go find everything I could about those people. And I tell you, the universe is this weird thing because I used to track Colin Powell with great religion. I was religious, acolyte of his.
Pretty amazing man.
Yeah. And now, I mean, this is a person that I see with great regularity, literally all over the world as I travel. I'm seeing him. Oh, yeah, I remember you. I'm like, oh, my gosh, I can't believe you remember me. Yeah. As a little boy, I stalked you like a scorned girlfriend. But
awesome.
When preparation connects with opportunity, amazing things happen. I want that for every single person. It does not mean that you get to be a superstar. There was only one Michael Jackson. It does not mean you get to be a super duper athlete. There's only one Michael Jordan. Right. But you can be super in whatever it is you can be super in. Okay. And I believe that we can all be super, but you got to put the work in. And so everybody do the work. So if the leaders are doing the work and the people are doing the work, guess what? Better result for everybody.
Well,
so that's what I see.
I love it. There's on a less intellectually profound, but emotionally 100% congruent. There was, in an alternate life, I was a bit of a bodybuilder, and there was a bodybuilder named Ronnie Coleman. He's a multi-time world champion. He's a cop in Dallas, or he was a cop. And he had this great saying in his very colloquial English. everybody want to be strong, but nobody wants to lift those heavy ass weights. And so you have to lift the weights. You have to to figure out what your version of that is and do it. And
there's no special pill. And I think life is so much richer when you are intentional about adding diverse experiences to it. I mean, the greatest stories that my 12-year-old tells me are the times that we've been traveling somewhere outside the country, and her life compared to my life.
Wow.
When I dreamed about traveling, I didn't travel the first time out of the country until I was 22 years old.
Yeah.
I've never stopped since then. But, she got to go to China as a 9-year-old, and I'm like, my gosh, this is what she's going to bring to the table as a young woman, world traveler. Is just so different than what I've been able to bring so far, and when I've had to really, really work hard to get these experiences.
That's got to be so profoundly moving for you to have. I'm likewise from a modest background, and whatever I've achieved is light years from what was maybe expected. So. That has to be amazing for you to look at your daughter and then see.
It really is. It really is. And then with all the travel I'm doing, I do about 12 seminars a year outside of the U.S. You start to identify patterns, and you can, like, regardless of the language, there's a thirst for knowledge, not from each other, about our different cultures, about what it takes to be a great organizations. So I actually get more business ideas from the travel than I would if I was just sitting here reading a journal. And so one big thing that pops out to me in terms of opportunities is around executive education. I'm not talking about certificate programs. I'm talking about leaders in a room learning a new skill in a safe place. So the same thing you have to do here in the U.S. to get your staff to trust you, you have to do the same thing for these executives to take their avatars off, take those masks off, and realize, say, listen, I don't know. I'm terrified of pitching. I want to do a TEDx, but I don't like talking in front of people. How do I get there? What steps am I taking to get to this different place? Because I think it's going to help accelerate my career. These are things that we do all day long, every single day. And people will pay a premium for that. Now, you got people paying a premium for this week-long experience. You're doing this very beautiful place somewhere in Ukraine or Romania or China, wherever you are. I mean, everyone is winning. Everyone is having value added to their life. And it's not something you would have picked up had you not taken the first step of just going to a place you don't know, engaging in a way that you can't engage. Like, I can't speak Romanian. I don't speak Chinese. I don't speak Ukrainian. And so it forces me to be a lot quieter when I'm there, so that I listen better, I observe better. And it's like professional development for me. Because I'm forced to watch and learn and smile. I feel like kind of the dumb relative, just sitting there smiling. I don't understand what they're saying, and invariably someone else speaking English and tell me what's going on. But it's just fantastic, and I learned so much from these opportunities abroad.
Yeah, so Kordell, looking into the future, again, I'm really amazed by your words on leadership, on the future, leadership curator. I think it's very important. So speaking of mindset, speaking about thinking models, right? Right now, we want to foster leaders who have this vision to go global, to really engage in, to really experience, but also bring the experience back to its people. And so sometimes take much broader view about the world, a bigger vision, or a miracle thinking model. How could you actually help people to understand the value of and the qualities you mentioned you get out of all your experience, like just by engaging with them, they see what you do and they will gradually grow that thinking mold so that they always want to go out to do more and be more, broad vision? Or it's like some specific thing you need to design in the educational program or in the policies so that people will realize that in order to really be bold about the future, we all need to, pay attention to this kind of thinking. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think it's both and. You have to inspire people to be humble. I mean, you get to a certain place in your career, you don't want to put yourself in a position where you are not the person that knows the most. You're not the leader. And I think back to my time at IBM. you could not get promoted above a certain position at IBM if you didn't spend 3 years in IBM Japan. And they would literally pick you up and they would say, you got 3 years in Japan. And they said, what's my job? Oh, you'll figure it out. And they wanted to see if your marriage fell apart. They wanted to see if your children acclimated. They want to see how you did. Yeah. Because if you can survive in an environment that you don't know, and you don't understand the culture, and you figure out you can adapt, then you can do anything. Right. And so we have to, as employers, start demanding, or I should say, looking specifically for people that have intentionally got out of their comfort zone, that did it for periods of time. Even teaching English in a different country, it requires quite a shift mentally. Takes quite a shift from a social status standpoint, because they're the corporate inertia of the U.S. and European countries, that you go to college and then you go for the work for the best firm that you can. Even though the work you're doing may not be super value added, at least you've been branded by that experience. But we need more brands. And one of those brands has to be a self-starter that says, you know what, I can learn a lot about myself. I can learn a lot about another culture by being in that culture. And I actually be better in my own culture, because now I have a basis for comparison. I had a colleague, I won't name the company, this is years ago, and he used to tell me, I've never left the U.S. I've been in Texas my whole life. And I don't need to. I can tell you that this is the absolute best city in the world. And I said, how do you know that? It would drive me crazy. They say, Kordell, don't engage him. I said, no, he is wrong. There is objective truth, and he doesn't know what it is.
Someone is wrong on the internet, or in this case, in your office.
Yes.
I can't come to bed, honey. Someone's wrong on the internet.
It would drive me crazy. It absolutely would. And you have no notion of comparison. How could you possibly say that? That's a belief system, right?
It's scary, but hilarious, but scary.
It unfortunately is prevalent in the United States of America.
Yeah.
So that's
at least they're self-sorting with their hats and such. It's a little bit easier to.
Exactly right. So that's one side of the equation, this idea that people have to take personal initiative. The other side is, I think companies have to understand the value. If they want people like that, why don't you take your stars and put them in a situation where they can't be the stars, to see how they adapt? Take the old IBM method. A little brutal, no doubt, uprooting family for 3 years just to see how you do, see if the family falls apart. But there's a middle ground example of that, where you can go and on a secondment in a different country for a couple of years, maybe lead a project or work on a project. But your world is all that much bigger. You have a much wider network. And these things, I mean, if you live right, you'll see these people again, over and over again. You have opportunities to work together and do even bigger things. And so I am very, very positive on international exchange, person-to-person exchange, getting out of your comfort zone. I try to do it at least once a week.
Well, this is fantastic. As we bring this home a bit and let you get on with the rest of your day, we really appreciate your time. What is next for you in terms of these engagements specific to China? And then also, we'll be sure to ask how people can get in touch or track you or say hi on LinkedIn or whatnot. But what's kind of next for you related specifically to China engagements? And will we see you in Portugal at the next Horasis meeting?
Yes, I hope so.
That's like three questions in one there.
I've never been to Portugal, but I go to Spain at least once a year, so it's close enough, right?
Nice.
But what's next for me is really to ramp back up the Sophomore Project. And, we're really disappointed that it didn't work out with the charter schools. I thought that would have been a perfect place to house it. But this is just another opportunity to do what I said I was going to do in the beginning, which is to recruit directly to families. And so, we're building out the website now. Setting up the corporate structure, you have to be very, very careful, because you are dealing with people's precious children. And so vetting insurance companies, and also talking to people that have done a lot of exchange over the years, gap year type work, because that's the closest equivalent. It's a gap year field, but you're doing it during school. And so the hope is that in 2022, we can have our first cohort in China. And that's an important year, because in 2022, my daughter will be a sophomore. And so my promise to her is to try to make this happen for she and her friends. I think it'd be a tremendous experience for any young American to experience China for a semester of their sophomore year.
And she'll get to be the leader, because she's been already.
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I said, look, I only have one child. And as my favorite comedian says, I have to teach her to break elbows. She can't just be a person.
I know your favorite comedian is.
Nice. Yes. Yes.
I really enjoyed the talk.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And the best way to reach me is on LinkedIn. That's my primary social media tool.
Okay.
I'm so busy, you had to choose one, and LinkedIn is my preferred. So it's Cordell Carter, Esquire, ESQ. There's only one of me, thankfully, on LinkedIn so far.
Nice.
And that's the best way to follow me.
Well, Kordell, really appreciate it. As Ying said, it was really a treat to get to talk to you. I saw you running around in Vegas, but we didn't actually get to have a conversation. So it's nice to get.
Yeah,
to
I was
do
only
it
there
now.
for 24 hours. So
Right. Well, we were all siloed on our mission.
Yes, indeed. Well, thank you all so much, and the best of luck to both of you.
Okay, it's Brendan again, and I'm still by myself, but I have so much to say about this episode. I'll try to boil it down in just a few thoughts here. The main thing is that I am so impressed with Kordell's humanistic focus. He is using his significant powers for good and not evil, which is, of course, always nice to see these days. Probably the most striking and, frankly, personal takeaway for me is that as a fellow Southerner who is also self-created in many of the ways he touches on, I was especially engrossed in this conversation, but frankly, being a Caucasian Southerner, my experience was different in ways than his, which of course is discussed in an interview, and of course that should be fairly obvious. And since Ying is not able to join me in the studio at this exact moment, I will share that being from a small town in China and having lived in so many places around the world herself, she also really deeply related to Kordell in her own ways. We'd love to hear what you think about this show. In general, that is true, and that is really specifically true with this. Please add and stalk us on Facebook, Twitter, or LinkedIn. Leave comments about this episode, nice ones hopefully, or suggestions for future shows. And don't forget that if you want to leave us a little holiday cheer, you can do that via that donations link, if you like, at howchinaworkspodcast.com. As soon as you click the inner page, it's right there on the main homepage. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you next week.